Hello, we're Board Game Opinions. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Mark.
And we've just finished playing the entire season of Pandemic Legacy, Season 0, which is actually the third in the sequence. They did Pandemic Season 1, Season 2, and then they've gone back in time, and Season 0 is set before either of them. Now, this is a spoiler-free video. We are going to talk about the campaign and our experience as a whole, but without spoilers, just our impressions of how it compared maybe to other seasons, how much did we enjoy it, that kind of thing. But we will also be talking about the very first game that you set up, the prologue or introductory game. So if you want to know absolutely nothing about the game, you need to stop watching now, okay? But we're not going to give away any of the reveals that you get as you play through the campaign. So there are no extra components or anything on the board. This is just the initial first game, if you like. So perhaps first of all, what do we think of the new theme, the new mechanics for this particular season?
Well, you get sent into... So the difference between this and regular Pandemic is you'll notice on the board there's some little red people, and these are agents. You're in the middle of the Cold War in 1962, I believe. Yep. We played the whole year of 1962, and obviously that was kind of the height of the some of the conflicts in the Cold War just before the Cuban Missile Crisis and things like that. So rather than fighting disease, you're fighting or dealing with Soviet agents. So already they've kind of flipped it on there. The agents kind of pile up in places, and then if certain too many agents appear, you get incident tokens instead of outbreaks, and they work slightly differently. They can be they're way more variable, aren't they? Yeah,
so when you get a fourth agent, it doesn't spread out like regular Pandemic with the disease keeps spreading. Instead, you're drawing a card, and the card has different effects each time, so there's a random effect.
They're much more random. They can potentially be worse. More often than not, they're going to be better or not affect you at all.
So they might add extra agents.
The range of it could, in theory, be bad. You can get hit several times badly.
They're harder to protect yourself against, I think, when they go bad.
I think the secret agent thing's nice. I think, as a whole, it captures that pretty well. There's a lot of references, but also some culture references of the time as well.
Yeah.
You get to disguise all your people with
so you get a book of aliases, don't they?
Yeah.
And so you pick an alias, and they've got a nice...
And they've got like hairstyles and things of the time, and glasses and all that sort of thing. So it does try to make you feel like you are a secret agent and you are creating a secret disguise. And that works pretty well.
You have several different aliases, and each alias has a special ability. A bit like in regular Pandemic, each character has a special ability, but you can change from one alias to another. So if you need one special ability for this situation, then you can switch to a different alias and go into somewhere else and take a different kind of action. So that was nice.
Rather than taking like disease and becoming ill, you lose cover. And so you lose, once your aliases had lost too much cover, they potentially become liable, and bad things will happen. I won't go too much into exactly what those might be, but it changes things enough that it feels a bit like... I've not played Season 1, but Season 2 changed it enough that it didn't feel like regular Pandemic, and this does the same sort of thing.
The last one thing you have is the teams, which you create. You essentially spend the cards to create them, and these can move around the board, mopping up all of the agents on a space.
So you're not curing diseases as such. No. Usually you're collecting the cards to cure the diseases. In this, as Mark says, you build the teams, but then you get to move the teams around, which is really nice.
Obviously, as you say, there's nothing to cure. The end game objective at no point is to clear disease, because that's not the point of this game. The objectives are varied and different, because that isn't the aim.
Espionage, and you're trying to deal with incidents or find certain things on the board or uncover whatever it might be, and you'll need teams to do that usually. So part of the game is kind of managing the board and then sending the teams to kind of fulfill the things, which means you can't deal with the mission straight away until you've got your teams built.
Yeah, that's really nice. So I really enjoyed the theme. Thematically, it feels very different from regular Pandemic. In terms of mechanically playing the game, your actions are very similar. You move around, you can spend an action to remove an agent kind of thing. So mechanically, it's very similar to Pandemic. But as the campaign progresses, as you might expect, there are plenty of changes. How did you feel like the campaign developed in terms of, big moments, or how different it was from previous seasons?
I liked them. I liked what they did. They are different. They feel different to what was available in the previous seasons of differences. If you think the Season 1 of Pandemic is essentially Pandemic plus expansions slowly being added on, more or less. This much like season 2 has to do something different. So again, it has to invent a new series of objectives that you won't have seen before that play on the board differently. And I liked the different styles of objectives they put on the board, and they were difficult to deal with, and they made you think in a different way.
Yeah, you had you've got basically an action sheet, and I don't know whether we can reveal, but you get more and more things you can do over the course of the game. So it's not like the same set of actions you get, and there's more and more things you can do because the things you have to accomplish change. And there were a few like oh wow moments in terms of wow, this is significantly different how things change. So I liked it, and they did it in such a way that they haven't made it too oh wow, because this could still be our world. This isn't like an alternate reality, is it, or anything like that? This could have happened. They haven't broken away from historically what might have happened in the Cold War, of what they might have to deal with, but not have told us. So in that way, they've changed it up a bit, but not too much that it kind of breaks continuity.
There were a couple of big reveals, although I didn't feel on the whole it was as different as Pandemic Season 2. That one felt like the most out there, different from base.
I mean, that felt out there from the first game where you looked and went, I can't see any of the board.
Yeah, because you start with
and you don't. And this fundamentally still starts with a board with a load of locations that you can move around. They work differently, the locations, but that's such a bigger change on the second season. It's so out there and so different. Yeah.
Because the second season is based in the future, so they can do
whatever
they can do. They can do different things, and they did. Yeah. So this is less out than that, but the change from not fighting disease and fighting agents is nice, and it's different enough that I don't feel I'm playing Pandemic.
No, it felt innovative, I thought.
Yeah, if this had been a third legacy game of fighting diseases to some extent, I know they were different. Actually, it wasn't disease in the second one, was it? Again, that was putting it. That was reverse.
It was putting cubes out instead of taking them off.
But again, it's good that they didn't just give us cure some diseases, because I would just play season 1 again or play regular Pandemic.
Yeah. So in terms of our overall enjoyment of the whole campaign, how did it rate?
I found it easier than season 2, and for that reason I think I prefer season 2.
Okay.
Having not played season 1, I felt like we did well. We might have been lucky on some missions, but overall it felt slightly easier.
I would say it's definitely easier. Yeah. Like on the previous 2 seasons, we failed quite a few months, but on this one we succeeded all but 1 month effectively.
Yeah.
We only properly failed it once, and that I couldn't believe we were doing that well. When we compared our final score, you get a score at the end, and we did hit the very highest score you can get. But I don't know if it was just because it was lucky, but as you say, it felt like it was easier to me.
We rode our luck on some missions. We definitely did.
I think you have to, though.
Yeah.
And versus that, we did occasionally get hit badly by luck of the draw, and again, that's going to happen. Yeah, 2's much harder than this. One is more difficult than this. But 1, you kind of have the luxury of kind of already doing it before if you've ever played Pandemic.
Yeah.
So it makes it a little easier. I mean, that again diverged the further you went on. Different things happened. So, yeah, that got. But yeah, this was the easiest of the 3, certainly.
Yeah. In terms of my enjoyment, I can't quite put my finger on why here, but I think I actually enjoyed this more than any of the others. Maybe it's because it was easier. Steve prefers it harder, and I prefer it.
I've enjoyed this. This has been good. I don't think I'm bothered that we succeeded.
I think something about the mechanics and the actions and having to switch your aliases and things just worked really well.
One thing I think that was different is that we specialise in much more divergent ways than previous seasons. And I think basically every game we knew what we were doing as a team, and I had certain things that I was way better at, so I dealt with this, and Jonathan dealt with that, and Mark sorted this out. And although it felt like we were doing the same things every game, the fact that we'd specialise our characters to fit very well with each other, we had our own role. It felt like we were a proper team with 3 specialists doing their own thing. Yeah. And at no point did Jonathan kind of step on my toes and do the thing I was best at, because it was just much more efficient for me and to do that. And so that felt quite nice, and it felt much more, that I had I am that specialist, and every time I'm thinking, well, I'll deal with that because I'm the best at doing it. So that felt different to season 2 in that regard, I guess.
I really liked the exploration in the second one. I think it's so memorable to do that and to cover it as things appear on the board. I mean, you know what ultimately the planet looks like. It wasn't that far in the future.
Yeah.
But there are things that you gained and you found the board and other things that were cool. I like the general spy feeling of this. That worked really well. One has the luxury of being the first legacy game I played, and so that on its own is a heavy weight to that. I think because it was the first time I'd played this, and I go, well, this games can play like this. You can have these shocks, you can have these permanency. So it's difficult. It's almost unfair because I think one will be the one I always remember the most because it's at the time when I played it and I hadn't played a legacy game. If it wasn't for that, I think I still slightly prefer 2. Just because for the exploration. But this... I actually think I prefer the overall game of this more. Yeah. I think 2 just had... its highs were higher.
Okay. I think with Mark there, actually. I think 2 was more out there, but I think I've actually enjoyed this the most.
Any final thoughts then, before we give it a rating?
I'm not sure what else to say. Yeah, it's kind of like you've probably got to. You can play any of them in any. Actually, I wouldn't play the second one, but you could play this or season 1 first. Either order is fine. It doesn't really matter. I'll probably play 1 first just because it's the closest to normal Pandemic, but they're all very good to play.
Yeah. Rating then?
8 out of 10.
Okay.
I think I'd give it an 8.5.
Okay. I definitely enjoyed this more than any other Pandemic season. But I think if you enjoy the other 2, you definitely want to play this. As we said, it feels different enough, and you're definitely going to enjoy it almost as much, if not as much, as the previous 2, I think. I would be on an 8.5. Overall, I had a great time, really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend it. All right, thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye. Bye.